Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information. Drew Meredith, how you going, mate?
Whew, very, very good. What a great start to the new year.
Oh, mate, it's been a good summer and you're looking fresh in your hat there, buddy.
The weather's been exceptional.
It's been exceptional. It's a bit hot. Sand is everywhere, but it's a good, I don't know where I went with that one, but
all about the base tan.
Today we're talking about our favorite, some of our favorite books and podcasts. We had a question come in.
I might have a bonus book too.
You got a bonus, do you?
Yeah.
I've only got books. I could include some podcasts for investors.
You just randomly pick one from your flexing collection behind you there.
So I shared this in the email last year, Drew.
Owen's Coming From Home, yep.
See that? That's George Classon's The Richest Man in Babylon. And over my shoulder up here, that's Factfulness. So there's a reason that those two books are the only two that stand up on my shelf. Because those, in 2024, those were the two books that
fell over.
I want to highlight for everyone. Yeah, they fell over and they just landed upright on the top of the shelf somehow. I mean, gravity, science. We had a question that came in, and if you're new to the Australian Investors Podcast, this episode is pre-recorded, but normally Drew and I are here every Saturday morning at 7 a.m. answering your questions and generally just not answering your questions. So a question came in.
Talking about goat's cheese, talking about seasonings for
our favorite
eggs.
Trying to get people who listen to the show to sponsor the show, just random things alongside investing. But you can ask a question via the link in your show notes, or if you're watching on YouTube, in the YouTube description. Someone wrote into us late last year, Drew, and they said, what's the difference between Rask Tash Invest, who was on the show recently, and Captain Goat Cheese, otherwise known as Mary Quite Contrary or Drew B. Gooby podcasts? So this came from Don't Drop the Baton. $100 if you have the answer for real. So I basically think that they're saying, what's the difference between all of these podcasts and peeps out there? And this is a good jumping off point for some books and things that we like. Drew, I know you've got a couple of kids. Is there one book on parenting?
Oh, is there a book on parenting?
Just one. Oh, when you go, because I know you go to the local library very regularly.
I actually read a few before my first child, but most of that was around like how to tie the burrito. Yeah. So it was actually like the baby owner's manual. Okay. I'm pretty sure it was like perfect for a first-time dad trying to work out the very basics. Maybe how do you wipe? How do you hold the legs? How do you put a nappy on? What are the different cradling techniques? What's the most effective burping?
Wow. But my point is that there's not one book, right?
There's a stitch up. No, there's hundreds.
That's it. And just like finance, there's no one way to manage your money. There's no one way to retire.
I see where you're taking this. This wasn't a stitch up. Okay.
There's no one podcast. And if you listen to the shows over the years, the Rask podcast, you'll know that some of our most frequent guests are Tash Invests, Drew B. Gooby over here. He's not really a guest, he's a host, but you've got Equity Mates. You've got Tash, Invest with Queenie. You've got Glenn James from My Millennial Money. All of these wonderful people that come on the show regularly. And we think it's a great way to cross-pollinate and collaborate with others. So you really just find the level you're at. With our podcast in particular, and with what we do both at Rask and Waddle.
We're the dad pod.
We're kind of the dad. We're kind of like the middle-aged to late-aged dad pod. But also a lot of ladies listen to this, like a lot. So a lot of mums, a lot of grandmothers, that sort of stuff. The way we structure our overall pie is that you would subscribe to this podcast if you were just interested in investing from beginner through to, well, maybe not beginner, but like intermediate through to the really advanced stuff. The Australian Finance podcast is more beginner to intermediate. And then we've got the Australian Retirement podcast, which is your jam, Drew. That's all about retirement pre and post. Financial planning, wealth, estate planning, that sort of stuff. Then we've got the Australian Property podcast, which obviously is about property, but not just property. It's like how to use your loans effectively, how to commercial property, residential property, building, developing, that sort of a thing. We've got, that's just in our network, but then there's a Waddle Partners YouTube channel, which is all about short videos, trying to educate you to transition to retirement and that sort of a thing. And that's how we kind of think about it. We don't need to be everything to everyone. So with that said, Drew, Give us your books or podcasts. Like if someone's...
Did you get the $100?
$100?
Yeah. Was that $100?
Yeah, they said the name was Don't Drop the Baton, promised us $100. So I think it means, just judging on their answer, I think it means they're going to send both of us $100. So we did answer the question for real. So whoever this is a legally binding contract. You owe us $100 each. We'll take it care of Wattle Partners, Drew and Wattle Partners.
I'll take it in kind in everything eggs.
Yeah.
27 bottles of anything eggs.
Yeah.
In my book, so this is just really the best books I've read. I end up doing a lot of audiobooks, and I might put a little bonus in there. So they're not all investment. And I do tend to read a lot investment, but a lot of it's more like biographies and like almost leadership and kind of learning things from that, because we naturally run a few businesses. So the first one, and I know you've read this one too, is 0 to 1.
Peter Thiel.
Written by Peter Thiel, who was the founder of, was that PayPal, and then Palantir, which is killing it at the moment too.
Yeah.
And this was like, you talk about like bootstrapping and all those sort of things when you're doing a startup, and I'm sure you've gone through these before. But this was, I found this super interesting because it just reiterated like the client focus that you need in businesses, or the user focus, and that you can have an idea without revenue, and you can have revenue, but if it's not something that the user wants or has a good experience with, then it's just going to die pretty quickly. So it's the idea of going from zero revenue to revenue, pre-revenue business. Doesn't mean you need to be in startups. Just means I think it's a way to approach all business.
I feel like he was kind of like the first voice in like product-led marketing. And what I mean by that is like he kind of, the thing that I took away from that was, if you're going to create a product, and he's mainly talking like tech startups and that people like people that want to change the world. My big takeaway from that was, if you're going to build a product, it has to be 10 times better than the next than the next best product. And if you do that, this whole idea of product-led marketing, I know it sounds really intuitive to everyone, but if you just have the best product, you put yourself in the best position to grow. And a good example of that is Atlassian. Atlassian has kind of, like, there's stories of Atlassian, the Australian tech business, that's like, it was run on no marketing for like 3 years, like zero marketing, and then just a bunch of credit cards to get the business running. I don't know about you, Drew, but I feel like a lot of business owners make a huge mistake, and particularly software engineers and engineers in general. They think, I'll just build the best product and everyone will use it.
Yeah.
Like, yes, 0 to 1 says build a great product, but marketing is also essential. Like, we do this podcast, right?
That's how you win.
Yeah. So you need to do both really well.
Particularly in the current world where everyone can just pop up with a competitor, and code's pretty, ChatGPT can pretty much code a lot of things for you these days. So
yeah, well, I've been chatting to a lot of software engineers recently, like really big ones, like really good software engineers that are really despondent, and they're just like, to be honest, my role is not redundant, but I'm going to be like drastically changing how I approach my profession because of code that's created by machines. But I think it's a superpower for them, but they might take it negatively. You mentioned Palantir, which is kind of like, I think it's kind of like the third big company that Peter Thiel has founded.
And that's data driven, isn't it?
Yeah. So it does, like, they wouldn't say this, but I'm pretty sure they do all the tech for like CIA, NSA, governments around the world, not just the USA, like all governments. I think that's my inference around some of their government clients, but they do data analytics, software engineering, massive data integrations, that sort of stuff. But they've always been a bit, in my opinion, they were a bit cagey on what exactly they did. Here's a fun fact for you. In the last 2 years, the stock's gone from $6 to over $70.
Yep. In how long? 1 year?
2 years.
2 years, yeah.
So it's
ranked number one vendor in AI, data science, and machine learning. And then this is a guy who founded PayPal, so he was already a billionaire before he did this. And I mean, that's why the book is so interesting, because it's like, well, why do it again?
But not to spend too much longer on this, but then you think about like Peter Thiel, all of the guys that the PayPal mafia, like Elon Musk, all of those guys. There's actually a pie chart that someone can Google out there. It shows you in the middle of the pie all the founders of PayPal. Elon Musk wasn't a founder; he was the founder of X.com, and then they integrated with PayPal. But if you look at this pie chart in the middle of it, it's got all the founders. And then as you go further out of the pie chart, it shows you all of the companies that they founded, like beyond the first wave of founding the companies, and then another wave and another wave. So like Palantir is like the third for Peter Thiel, and SpaceX is like the 20th for Elon Musk. Anyway, great book if you want to learn about how to create products. I'll start off with, I don't know if it's not on the shelf behind me. Maybe it's in the office. The Ulysses Contract by Mike Kemp, an Australian. So I would read the Ulysses Contract if you're intermediate investor level, like you've been doing it for a few years. You want to learn why people go wrong in the stock market, whether it's worth picking stocks or whether it's worth picking, like just investing in ETFs. Even if you don't feel like you want to invest everything in ETFs, if you're kind of like us, like you want to do everything, it's not just index investing, it's not this or that. Mike makes a great case for index investing, but I take his like writing in so many different ways and to talk about behavior and that sort of stuff. Great book, Australian author.
I haven't read that one. I might come up and grab a copy.
Yeah, bud. Come over.
I think Major Street too, wasn't it?
Yep, Major Street, same as your book.
Yep. I'm still waiting for my book to pop up in your list, but it still doesn't seem to happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there was like a typographical error actually on the Golden Years. I don't know why it didn't end up in the list. Must be. I'll chat to Monique. Go on, number 2 for you.
I'm going to flip. I'm going to stay with. So this was more interesting and insightful as kind of investor and decision maker. Mm-hmm. And I know everyone always says if there's books to read about finance, read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
Yep.
But I tried reading that, and it talk about thinking fast and slow. Like it's a pretty slow book to read.
Yeah.
So if you want the Cliff Note version of it, or the interesting, not the sorry,
the interesting part of it.
As always, Michael Lewis has done a great job of talking about Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, the two that work separately and then work together and came up with basically what behavioural finance is today, or I think there's a different word for it. So The Undoing Project by Michael Lewis. It's
He's such a good writer.
Easy to read. Yeah, he made like behavioural finance interesting, and turned it into a people story about these two incredible, professors, humans that went through that have grounded a lot of what we understand about investing and decision making today.
I haven't actually read that book, so that's really interesting. So I'll bring this up for people that are watching.
It's got eraser on the front.
Yeah, so it's this one, yeah. Undoing Project. There we go. Cool. The Undoing Project. All the links to these will be in the show notes, by the way. My next book is actually for the stock pickers. Actually, no, I'm going to do a different one. I'm going to do How Not to Lose. You read this book too, Drew. So
I got through this in like 6-7 hours on the beach.
Yeah. So this book by John Addis, who appeared on the show last year, he's appeared a few times on the Australian Investors podcast. Absolutely cracking book, just about how to pick companies, when not to pick companies, and just lessons learned from like 30 years in the market, and not just from him, but from the entire Intelligent Investor team. If you read one book on stock picking in Australia, I would probably make it this book.
Yeah. And it's interesting because he wasn't, he's not a trained analyst or anything. He was a financial journalist, became part of the investment team at is Intelligent Investor, like the newsletter. And he goes through the wins, like what they got right, what they got wrong, but in even talking about things that he missed and why he missed, in hindsight, why he missed them. I think that's so important. Just kind of rethink, like considering what your thought process was for things like Meta or Tesla, and why you didn't invest in them, as well as the things you did invest in.
Yep. Really good. So that'll be in the show notes. I'm putting all of these down now. So if you hear me typing, that's what I'm doing. So we've got 0 to 1, the Ulysses Contract, good for index investing and behavioral finance. We've got the Undoing Project, which is all about behavioral finance and the relationship between those two. That's the one I haven't read.
Yeah.
What else have you got on your list? You got one more?
No, this one's going full leadership and pretty interesting. Like anyone in business, whether you don't have to be in a management position, any position within a business. And it might sound a little bit cliche, but Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last, not the, I can't remember what his first one was called, but Leaders Eat Last.
Start with why.
Yeah. I mean, the why is kind of maybe a bit overdone these days.
Yeah.
But Leaders Eat Last is more about like management styles, growing teams, getting teams to work well together, It also fills up my algorithm all the time on Instagram Reels or Reels, whatever they're called. But I found this one. So we gave this to a copy of this to all of our management team across the businesses we own as kind of a perspective on, their roles. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what business you're in, but the different ways to help and, get people to work together and work towards that common goal.
I actually quite like the start with why, to be honest. I know it's you.
I didn't. Yeah, I thought it was fun. It's just got. It's just got spoken about so much.
Yeah, everyone. I think a lot of business owners. Maybe it's different for your managers, but I think business owners that are listening to this, a lot of business owners kind of just get inertia and they just keep doing the same shit over and over and over again.
Yeah,
never really stop to ask themselves, why am I doing this? Why am I working 8 days a week?
I like this word, like you can see just even in the title here, if you scroll down a little bit more, today's workplaces are full of, sorry, we missed it there, up higher.
Wait, where were we talking?
Cynicism, paranoia, and self-interest. So it's like, how do you create a culture of people trying things, people being innovative? Like it doesn't sound like that from the book, but it's how do you create those kind of positive cultures rather than, covering oneself. And
so you could give this book to
teams.
You could give this book to yourself, like as a business owner, but you could also give it to like your general manager and then your team leaders and your regional managers and that type of people that aspire to be managers should read this book.
About working as teams. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. It gets amazing reviews. I've seen it like talked about everywhere. I haven't read it. So you've brought some good ones to the table, my friend. My final book. I
got a bonus one too.
Okay. My final book is Poor Charlie's Almanack.
I still haven't read that. So
if you're listening to this and you're like, these guys talking about books that seem to be finance people, do not start with this one.
It's deep and boring.
It's not. It's super.
Yours is a pretty bougie copy there too.
Well,
hard. Oh, that's big. Yeah, that's not for me.
She's a big boy. But actually, my other one, Drew, I'm holding this up to the screen for everyone, and it's almost feeling a third of the screen.
Yeah.
My other book would
bigger
be
than your head,
4 times the size of this.
Yeah.
So Stripe, which is like the payments gateway, has a publishing business, which is this up the top here, right here. And John Collison, who is one of the co-founders of Stripe, interviewed Charlie Munger just before he died. And this is a collection of
the book. Yeah.
I think this is the 3rd edition. I've got the 2nd as well, which is $200, but this one's about 50 in hard copy. Get it from Dimmicks or Amazon or whatever. So this is a collection of 11 speeches that Charlie Munger did throughout his life. What makes it truly incredible is Charlie never wrote a book. He just wrote speeches, and he let Peter Kaufman, who was an editor at the time, go through his office and just find like notes that Charlie had and speeches that he'd written down on pieces of paper and then put it all together. And some of these speeches were like 20 or 30 years ago, like when Charlie was a young pup. And
when he was 70.
No, but like speeches from when he might have been like, I don't know exactly how old he'd been. He might have been like in his 40s, right?
Yeah. So 50
and he was an unknown
years ago.
person, right?
Yeah.
And then what they did was they gave him a chance to respond to the ideas in his earlier speeches decades later. So like at the end of the chapters in here, you might talk about like he talks a lot about like why universities are training people the wrong way, why people don't have multidisciplinary learning skills and all this sort of stuff. So like you can see here, Charlie Munger was famous at the Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, Berkshire AGMs for saying, I have nothing more to add. Like Warren Buffett would go on this rant for 15 minutes about all these beautiful educational lessons. And then Charlie would be like, I have nothing to add. But if you look at the back of the book here, you can see that, right?
I can see that.
Talk 6 Revisited. So this is just a small one. But a lot of the times in the back of the book, he will say whether or not his initial thoughts from when he was like 30 or 40 had changed. And it's just, if you read this book, I listened to it twice in 2024 and then went back and started reading it again. If you get through this book and you understand everything, you're basically a god. But if you get through it and it's a bit over your head, I'd say put it down, go read something else, come back to it in a couple of years. It's not I read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, Drew. I'm not sure if you read that book. Just because some geezer on a US investing podcast said it was the best book he's ever read, it took me 4 years to read that.
Yeah, I read a few of those that are just sitting there.
And I persevered for 4 years on just random occasions to try and get through that book. I said, that's it, I'm finishing it. And it wasn't until we had Morgan Housel on the podcast quite a few years ago, and he said, it's the author's job to let you read the book. It's not your responsibility. If you don't like a book, stop. Put it away.
Move on.
That's sunk cost bias in full effect. Don't waste your time. Now, this book is phenomenal, but if you were reading this before you'd been investing or in business for 4 or 5 years, don't read it.
That's like reading The Intelligent Investor that everyone tells you? Like, they give you this list, and it is even in an audiobook turned up to speed, it is the most boring book to read.
I find that anyone who recommends The Intelligent Investor or Security Analysis to investors, like, hey, what book should I read? And they recommend Intelligent Investor or Security Analysis.
Always first.
Do not trust those people.
Do not. They know nothing about investing.
Yeah. They're great books.
Yeah.
But they are not, one, they're not beginners. Yeah. And two, seriously, like you might read through 800 pages and get 4 insights that are still really relevant. Do not read them. If you want to go back in history and read books like The Devil Takes the Hindmost, which is a book about stock market lessons over hundreds of years.
One Up on Wall Street.
One Up on Wall Street books. Even like Barefoot Investor's great. Don't read, I don't think I've ever recommended Security Analysis just because I know it's not. I read that first and I was like, who recommended this? Anyway, Drew, you got one more special for us, one more bonus?
I haven't quite finished it yet, but it has been quite very good, to be honest. And it's a book called Greenlights.
Oh, I've heard of this. Is this by
Matthew McConaughey?
McConaughey, yeah, I've heard
of
it.
It's exactly the opposite of what you think. But in this case, you cannot read the book. You need to listen to an audiobook because Matthew McConaughey narrates his own book. And if you know is it like Texas, New Orleans drawl? Yeah. Like it's like, it's like honey in your ears when you're listening to it. It's fantastic.
Honey in your ears.
Everyone would remember him from Dazed and Confused or an Oscar or various other.
What's the one you did with Lady Gaga?
And plenty of
Star is Born. Is that what it is?
No, that's Bradley Cooper.
Oh, shit, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's quite a few rom-coms as well. Don't forget that era of Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
So this reflects on his entire life and career. It's quite good. But the big part of this is that, without spoiling the book, is he sees green lights and red lights. When things happen that are good, green light. When things happen that are bad, red light, and then you change direction.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Pretty simple.
Pretty simple. Like it. Okay, mate. So good summer reading for folks. So there's a list here. The list is, we'll just go Matthew's voice in the notes so people know which one I'm talking about. Matthew's voice. So we've got Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last. We've got Poor Charlie's Almanack. And then we've got Greenlight by Matthew McConaughey. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We've got some questions that we'll get through now. If you do have any questions for us, please send them in via the link in the show notes. Remember that it's general advice only. We don't know your needs, goals, or objectives. So you should speak to a licensed and trusted financial planner, like, say, Drew here, if you're going into retirement or in retirement, or any one of the financial planners that you can verify on the moneysmart.gov.au website. We also have the ability to get matched with a financial planner. So Rask has vetted financial planning firms, and then you can get matched with the appropriate one by going into the show notes and the button that says financial planning. Sometimes the link says, services or something like that. Click on that link and you can get matched with one of the financial planners that we vet, including Drew here. So check that out. Charlie's Tribute is what I'll put in here. The first question that we've got comes from, which one? I wanted to do this one from Pion Fire. So maybe it's the FIRE movement. FIRE being financial independence, retire early. Hi, long-time listener, first-time questioner. Oh, welcome. I was curious about elite sports people announcing their retirement around 36 to 42 years old. That's their normal distribution, they say. Geez, this person's scientific. My question to you is, do they get any financial benefits by announcing their retirement, or is it just another way of saying, I'm unavailable for selection? Love the dad jokes. Interesting.
Yeah, someone does.
So financial benefits for retiring from professional sport, Drew, I have not come across any.
No, I'm pretty sure this would just be like a closeout of their contract. Like this would just be contractual. And most of the time I feel like retirements are forced, not voluntary. But yeah, I'm guessing like in anything, their employment contract or their agreement with Cricket Australia or, basketball, whatever it is, would have a clause that says they stop getting paid on retirement, or they're able to pursue other, and they'd have all kinds of clauses that they wouldn't restrict them from doing things. So no benefit. It doesn't. You can't have, unless you're over 60, and most elite sports people aren't over 60. Maybe a couple of sports, pickleball, lawn bowls, maybe over 60. But generally, yeah, there's no. It doesn't trigger anything from superannuation. Unfortunately, it'd be nice if it did.
Yeah. So you need to be
walking away today. Get the boat.
A lot of them do get sign big deals in their final few years, knowing that they're probably on the way out, and they do transition to media roles or to their own businesses. So I've done quite a few presentations for professional sports clubs and that sort of stuff. If you're listening, love doing them because it's really interesting to talk to the professional sports people, because what I've found when you talk to them, Drew, is you've got two sides of it. You've got the younger kind of, if I just take the male demographic, right, and I'm generalizing here, you've got the younger males, which are kind of like, let's go buy a new Jeep. What's the latest in Mercedes-Benz? And they're like just out there living their best life, so to speak. They're the ones that tend to squander it. And then, because you got to remember with professional sports, you're pretty much only at your peak for 5 years, then you're done.
And very few people ever get there.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other side of it is the kind of 27-year-old plus professional sports player that is like, okay, I've been in this world for a while, made some really good money. I don't have that much to show for it, even though I'm getting paid $500,000 or $1 million a year. I need to take this shit seriously. And so they're the ones, you can see them when we go to talk to them about finance and these types of things. They're the ones that are like, so what do I need to do? You've just spoken to me for 2 hours. Tell me what I need to do right now. Because they're like super serious and they know their lifestyle is about to change. And this applies to anyone, whether you're in a business, whether you're in a trade, because oftentimes, if you're a tradie, you don't always have the ability to work forever on the tool. So you've got to make long-term decisions as well. Any of those kind of occupations which rely on labor or like physical ability, you typically have, as you might say, golden years, but maybe younger in life, Drew. So what I would say to you is invest, like be regimented. If you're earning 200 grand a year, 300 grand a year as a professional sports person, shovel 30% of your money away, no matter what. Put it in an ETF, speak to a financial advisor, put it away. You've still got the other 200 grand before tax, of course. You still got the other 200 grand to go and do whatever you want, buy your cars and shit like that. You can still keep up with the Joneses and all your mates and your friends or your girlfriends if you're in female sport, which is a huge burgeoning part as well. I've done some speeches for those types of people. Save some of your money. You won't have the ability to save that amount of money forever. And everything else, like we've had Olympians on the show, like Grant Hackett recently. We've had a bunch of different sports people over the years, AFL players, rugby players, cricketers, like that doesn't matter. It's all the same. We're all in the same boat. So you got to save some money and invest. Drew, next one comes from, this is gonna like, we've only got a couple of questions, but we're going to get more technical in the next two.
This is a challenge.
Yes. And it's interesting because it's Challenger that might be brought up. Can you tell us more about annuities, Drew? Are they a good option when we already have Australian Super? So this person's obviously with Australian Super. Is there an ideal time to start an annuity, like with an inheritance when interest rates are high or before retirement? Is it something you can buy into over time or only with a lump sum? Is it like life insurance? There's a lot of questions about bloody annuities here. I'm going to jump in because Daisy Changed asked this question. Daisy Change, if you've asked this question and you're listening to this, go to the Australian Retirement Podcast.
Oh, you had a session, didn't you?
Because there's an interview that I did recently about annuities with the head of technical services. So this is like the most technical person in the whole of Challenger, which is the biggest annuities provider in the country. Yeah. And he breaks it down for us. So go to the Australian Retirement Podcast in your feed and click on the one for Challenger. It's out in January and it's part of the income series that we've done over there with Drew and James. Now, Drew, I'm going to ask you, for anyone that's not aware and might want to go and listen to that next, can you just explain the basics of an annuity, just the very basics?
The basics of an annuity is you give a large institution like Challenger money, and in return for that money, they'll provide you with a guaranteed rate of income for a certain period of time. Is that the most basic? Is that a good way to explain it?
So why would someone use an annuity? So is it the guaranteed aspect of it versus say...
They're promising to pay a certain rate of interest, and I think it's about 5% or something at the moment. It's been lower at different points. But essentially what you're doing is outsourcing the risk associated with generating that income to someone else, to Challenger. Okay. So and in that way, if you think about it that way, it's a form of insurance. And I believe Challenger and annuities are regulated like an insurance company.
Yeah, like a life business.
Yeah.
They call them a life business.
So annuities can be term, which is in the most simple way, you could think about it like you could buy a 30-year term deposit in the form of an annuity. And that way you're guaranteeing whatever the 4.5% income for the rest of your, for that entire term. And there's also lifetime annuities, which essentially last until which is more like an insurance policy. That lasts until you pass, and then pay an amount to your beneficiaries in that event.
And then there's also deferred annuities as well, if I'm not mistaken, where you could buy one now for the future.
Yeah.
So it kicks in 10 years,
put your money in
20 years, but you put the money in now.
Yeah.
That's important for people, Drew. If I'm not mistaken, if you're older, you might say, I'm 60 now. I want it in 20 years when I'm 80 because I'm going to have medical expenses.
Just to know you've got something there. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also, if I'm not mistaken again, Drew, it's also, if you think about money in annuities versus money in like a share portfolio or indeed an Australian super, that may have benefits if you're around the kind of maybe going to get the pension type thing.
Yep.
Because the pension, it may be it will treat your assets differently if you have an annuity versus, say, a share portfolio.
And some beneficial income as well. So annuities used to be huge when I was first in the industry. Back in
1996.
Back in the early 2000s. They were incredibly popular because from memory back then they had like 100% exemption from the assets test. So you could put in money into annuity and almost like so many people that were even on the borderline could get the age pension, another form of essentially guaranteed income in one way or another. So the benefit was always that's not where it is anymore. The exemption has reduced and it's only beneficial for like a much smaller targeted group of people. But I mean, me and Jamie and I discussed, we caught up with Challenger a few weeks ago as well. We're constantly discussing it because if you read Die with Zero, talks about having an insurance policy against longevity risk. Essentially, you're insuring against your own longevity by guaranteeing a portion of income. And you can either do that for, as you said, defer it and have income when you think you might have medical expenses, or the other way, put a portion of your capital away now, outsource it, don't worry about it, and then you never have to worry about interest rates as long as that pool of capital is enough to generate that base level of income you want. That's only one way, of course, and there's multiple ways to do that. At Waddle, basically, we attempt to build an annuity by having a diversified portfolio that has multiple inputs that make sure your income comes out. So just because that you can do that there, it does mean it's always the best and the best for every person. But this is a great question, and they're coming up all the time, similar to investment bonds, but quite different. So annuities tend to be more suited to retirees and those looking to, and probably with less experience and less engagement with their money, to make sure they're getting a reasonable income for the capital they've got.
Yeah. So that's a really good question. And if you do want more of that sort of juicy retirement stuff, head over to the Australian Retirement Podcast. One thing that I'll also call out, if you're interested in like tax and long-term investing, another tax structure you might consider. So there's super, then there's like these annuities things, but there's another one called insurance bonds or investment bonds. We did the episode with Grant Hackett, actually talks about that if you're interested in going back. It's only a few weeks in your podcast player. If you just scroll back a little bit, listen to that episode next with Grant Hackett. And he talks a bit about that and obviously his journey and that sort of stuff as well. But it's a good question. So Drew, we might call it there because we wanted to keep these summer episodes short. You need to get back to tanning yourself, sitting in the jacuzzi or doing whatever you do. Do you have a dad joke for us, or can you quickly?
I do, and I think this is a really good one. It's like the perfect segue, your comment just now, and I don't even have to read off it this time.
Okay, go for it.
So what do you call a cantaloupe in a swimming pool?
Grant Hackett? I don't know.
A watermelon.
That's pretty bloody good.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Pretty bloody good. That's like me in the pool, to be honest.
Yeah, trying to bring the summer vibe.
That's good, man. I'll give you an 8 out of 10 for that. That's pretty good, man.
We're on fire this week. Yeah, we did go live when we were recording this one. But
yeah, that's pretty good, man. That's pretty good. So if you want financial planning advice, January is the best time to book in with a financial planner. Typically, with a financial planning business right now, you're looking at probably, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks in terms of you go and you book in, you have a chat with them, and you start filling in some information, but it can take 4 to 6 weeks now. There's so much demand for financial advisors, and that only picks up as the year goes on. So if you're looking to get on the front foot with your finances this year, get a financial planner, get support, or if you're just starting to invest, go and read some of these books or subscribe to this podcast, or you heard us give the spiel about the other podcast. You'll find links in your podcast player for other series and other resources that we've mentioned throughout this episode. Drew, this is always fun. I guess I'll see you next Saturday for the 2 cents installment on the Australian Investors Podcast.
Good to see you.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.